Canon, The Legend of the New Gods is a strategy RPG released for the Sega Genesis or MegaDrive in 1996. The game only came out in Taiwan and was developed by the same studio who worked on Reversible Saga and Water Margin, both of which were surprisingly high-quality games, especially considering they were developed without any official dev kits or tools. Well, on April 2019, the game was officially translated into English and released in cartridge format by Piko Interactive, which is how I'm playing this. The game itself is heavily inspired by Shining Force, but with a few key differences which I'll get into in a bit. But before we get there, the game comes in a Sega Genesis style box that accurately mimics the official thing. The box is the same size and shape as the original MegaDrive or Genesis ones, and if placed on a shelf, most people would have a hard time telling it apart from the rest of your collection. I also actually like the cover on this one. I think the colors, weapons, and outfits are nice to look at, and the cover itself grabs your attention right away. The only thing I don't really like are the realistic looking faces. I think I'd prefer something a little more on the fantasy side. Previously, I had issues with the cover art for Piko Interactive's release of Brave Battle Saga, but that's because their realistic looking faces didn't really match with the clearly anime style the game was going for. Here, however, an argument could be made that the sprites are ambiguous enough to allow for both a realistic and anime-like cover. Though I'm fairly certain the developers were most likely aiming for an anime style. Plus, I don't know, the cover kinda reminds me of Suikoden, so I'll guess I'll give it a pass. The cool thing here is that the game actually has a reversible cover, and according to Piko Interactive's founder, Eleazar Galindo, he actually implemented this thanks to a recommendation of mine on YouTube, which is pretty damn cool. And is also the reason why it kills me to say that I don't really like the alternate cover. I understand that it's aiming for a more anime or cartoony look, which is what I wanted, but it just doesn't look that great. Their faces look weird, and the colors and shading look kind of basic. I do think it's a step in the right direction, but I'd recommend Eleazar to change artists. Inside, we find the cartridge and manual. The manual tells you a little bit about the story and characters, as well as explaining the game's basics. It's also adorned with character art from the cover, and it fits the instruction booklet really well. The only weird part is how blurry the sprites are. It's as if someone applied anti-aliasing to the sprites. If I had to guess, I'd say these were resized using GIMP instead of Photoshop. I say this because GIMP has this tendency to apply filters when resizing. Still, that's a small criticism for what essentially is a good manual. Additionally, at this point, I also feel Piko Interactive has perfected their cartridge shell designs as well. The plastic is smooth to the touch and feels exactly the same as an official one. It also doesn't have any of the imperfections of some of the earlier Piko releases, meaning there are no bits of plastic sticking out and the cartridge itself feels quite sturdy. It's not an exact replica from the official thing, as it has that notch on the side which I've mentioned so many times before on indie releases, and the space for the sticker is longer than that of an official cartridge. But overall, it looks pretty good. Finally, during my Brave Battle Saga video, some of you asked me to open the cart and take a look at its components. I'll admit I'm not a tech guy, but here goes, I guess. Well, I don't really know what I'm looking at, but I sent pictures to a few friends who have a better understanding of electronics than I do, and here's what they had to say. The cartridge has gold-plated fingers and tapered edge connectors, which is a good thing. It also has a voltage regulator, which should help against voltage spikes. However, this is not enough, and it's likely that there's still some voltage going to the pins. So, without resistors or level shifters, This could be a problem in the future, and maybe even damage the cartridge or the console itself. That was pretty much the feedback I was given, though I should also point out that this isn't the first time this topic has been brought up regarding Piko Interactive cartridges. And the company's founder Eli has addressed this issue in an interview on my channel. I can't really give any comments regarding this, as I'm not educated enough on the subject to have an opinion on it. So I guess I'll leave the decision to you. Overall, this is a nice package. There's no extra frills in it, but it doesn't really need them. I'd rather have a nice, clean package like this one instead of one with stuff like pogs. Booting up the game, Canon, The Legend of the New Gods, tells the story of an emperor who recently found a new wife but becomes bewitched by her. I'm not sure if she's supposed to be human or a spirit. But then again, I have a hard time following the story. See, from what I understand, the story is apparently based on a Chinese epic, and the game generally seems to assume you already know the premise, because plot points are raised and solved quickly, and characters are given very little introduction or personality. So yeah, the story isn't really the reason why you're going to play this. But I did enjoy the gameplay quite a bit. As previously said, this is a strategy RPG in the vein of Shining Force. In fact, that's likely where the game's main inspiration came from, especially considering they both use the same radial menu style. The first few missions are relatively boring and easy, as you can only control one or two characters. But as the plot progresses, your party grows. The game is divided by missions, which range from defeating enemies or bosses, to escorting NPCs, or reach a specific point on the map. Your characters will also gain experience, level up, and acquire new abilities as they become stronger. And throughout the map, you'll run into chests which carry items. These can go from healing items or MP restore items, temporary status boosts, or even permanent upgrades. Before each mission, you can take the time to select who you want to bring into the mission, equip or unequip items from each character's inventory, and check the win or defeat conditions. So all in all, it does seem like the developers put a fair amount of thought into the game. Characters seem to fall into basic warrior, archer, healer, and mage type classes, with a few minor variations. Though I do like the flying characters that can literally fly over any obstacle and attack from any angle. When fighting, characters don't go into a battle screen. Instead, you see the overworld sprites attacking each other, which is a bit of a shame. I know this studio is actually pretty good at creating pixel art. And while we do see some of this when performing magic or doing special attacks, I do feel their efforts went largely to waste considering most of the game has this overworld look. With that said, it is kind of funny how you'll start fighting human soldiers, but soon face off against mythological ancient Chinese monsters like flying ghosts, these harpy-like enemies, and shrimp soldiers. Okay, sure, why not? It's not that the game looks bad. The environments, backgrounds, characters, and animations look fairly good for the system. But after playing Brave Battle Saga, I know the studio could do far better. And it makes me sad that it doesn't have battle screen animations, similar to Fire Emblem or Shining Force. But with that said, I do like the colors, sprites, and attention to detail, like how your sword attack here casts a shadow as you use it. So clearly, there was effort put into the game's graphics. Now, as mentioned before, the first few levels of the game are pretty easy. But as you reach some of the later levels, the difficulty really starts escalating. But mostly for the wrong reasons, as certain stages will keep spawning new enemies onto the map if you're close to certain points. The problem is, you have no way of knowing what these points are until you reach them. And when you do, you need to have a pretty large safe distance from them to avoid the wave of constantly respawning enemies. But this becomes really difficult because some characters will cover more ground than others, while the enemies keep blocking your path or attacking you, and causing some serious damage, I might add. If you're not careful, you run the risk of reaching the absolute absurdity that is the game summoning nearly 10 enemies right next to you, completely decimating your party. At least, when you lose a battle, you get to keep all the experience and items gained. But that soon becomes a small consolation, because the bigger your level difference against the enemies, the less experience you earn from them. Meaning, if you're a few levels above your foe, you'll only gain 1 experience point for killing them. In these situations, the best I could do was to use some area of effect spells and abilities. And again, the menus just really remind me of Shining Force. Occasionally, you'll also run into bosses, and it's here I found an issue with the game's balancing, which was also present in Brave Battle Saga. Basically, you can easily withstand their physical attacks, as they barely cause you any damage. But their spells can nearly insta-kill 1 or more party members. One odd thing is that despite the story never having grabbed me, and generally being pretty confusing, the game has some really long dialogue segments, as well as a world map with a region select screen. The problem is, this select screen is never actually used. It just tells you where you are, but it feels like at one point the developers had the intention of letting you travel back and forth between areas, maybe to farm for items or experience. But it seems like this was never properly finished. Not only that, but sometimes the English text is so big that it goes beyond its intended boundaries. Additionally, there are also a few story points when it looks like the game can't handle having all the NPCs on the map and the text popping up at the same time. So you suddenly see the characters blinking as if they were disappearing. The music is also pretty good. I feel it doesn't quite reach the heights of Brave Battle Saga, but the songs that are here are mostly good, and again, better than several officially released titles. The sound effects are also pretty visceral and satisfying, especially when attacking enemies. The only issue I have with them are the screams your enemies make when you kill them. Running some tests, I also discovered the game uses both the Master System and Sega Genesis sound chips, but just barely. Basically, the Master System is used for menu sound effects and not much else. A bit disappointing, as the music likely could have been better if it had optimized both sound chips a little more. Overall, I enjoyed Canon Legend of the New Gods. It's a pretty decent Shining Force clone, and better than some official strategy RPGs on the console like Treasure. Seriously, the only thing Treasure has going for it is the overworld theme in Chapter 1. Now that's good bass. A shame the rest of the game sucks though. Canon, on the other hand, is a good game. If you already completed Langrisser and the Shining Force games, and you're looking for a pretty good but not great strategy RPG for your Sega Genesis or MegaDrive, you could do far worse than Canon Legend of the New Gods. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Stika's Retro Corner. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon, where you'll find all kinds of awesome rewards. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!